Welcome back, everybody, to another one in my time-lapse build video series. And this is kind of like an episode 2 of my 3-part series where I'm time-lapsing the build of the 1/48 scale A-26 Invaders. And in this particular video, we're going to be looking at the construction of the Revell A-26B Invader. Now, before we jump too far into this video, my name is Sean, and this is Sean's Aviation. As well, before we get too far, I want to just say thank you for everyone who is out there watching this channel. I appreciate everyone who does watch this. Every person who watches this channel does make this channel better in the long run. And as always, I appreciate any comments and whatnot that you guys have on these videos, ideas, and all that kind of stuff. If you haven't yet and you are enjoying what you watch down here, watch here, down below, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. The notification bell will let you know when I get new videos released. I release 4, maybe 5 a month, depending on the month and the content I have and how much free time I have to edit videos. Every time you like a video, it helps the algorithm push these videos out to more people who would like what they see. Now, if you'd also like to help out a little bit more in a monetary way, by all means, down in the comment section, or the description, I should say, you will see a link to my coffee account. I'm almost always got a coffee on the go while I'm down here, and every little bit does help offset some of the costs that I incur while doing these videos. But as always, please don't feel obligated to do that. I'm not here begging for money. That's not the point. I just have fun doing this, and I'm bringing you guys along for the ride while I'm doing what I enjoy to do. Now, that being said, I think it's time that we get into this video, and I'll explain where I'm going. So, as mentioned, this is the A-26B Invader. It's the same plastic as the monogram kit. The plan for this build is going to be, I have to remember which one is. This is the gun nose. So I'm doing this one up in a late World War II overall bare metal scheme. And I'm probably going to build this one with the wheels down and the bomb bay closed. That's the plan for now. And that'll be an all-over bare metal scheme. I am going to be using aftermarket decals. The decals I'll be using are these from Kits World. And you can see the scheme here is the top one, Maggie's Drawers. That's what I plan to build from the 416th Bomb Group, 671st Bomb Squadron, and its aircraft 4139360. So that's what I plan to do. I plan to use Alclad to actually complete the painting of this. And I guess we'll see how well this goes. So on that note, let's jump into this, and you'll see the time lapse of this A-26B Invader. And as usual with these aircraft kits, and this one is no different, I am starting with the cockpit. And right off the bat, you'll see here that despite my head being in the way, I'm cutting off the forward section of the cockpit, as this is the gun-nosed version. So the area for the bombardier is not required. And then there's just the general cleanup. And then I start assembling whatever parts I can assemble prior to the paint. see me pop back and forth to these nacelles quite frequently as I'm working on this kit. The fit was not spectacular, so it took quite a bit of effort and puttying to get the nacelles kind of joined properly and fix the seams. Here you can see I'm getting everything prepped to paint everything that needs to be painted interior green. You also would have noticed I got the nacelles assembled, and while I had them assembled, before I did the painting, I got them prepped with the seams and stuff. They're just easier to hold the seams when they're a separate unit. So I got all that taken care of, and then you'll see there that's parts from the other kit. I'm just taking a quick look at while I'm plugging away here, and then you'll see there's the final pieces all painted green. Putting them all back in the bag. You can just see ahead along the top, I've already got the fuselage and the nacelles painted at this point in building, and now it's just some of the detail painting. And apologies again, my head is right in the way for all of this. I need to find a better angle to do this, but all of the interior details are picked out in black and silver and red and everything else in preparation for weathering, which we'll see after the paint. Okay, everybody, rant time. Not sure if you've seen the other A26. Might as well plug for it if you haven't seen the C model review or time-lapse. It's up there on the top. It'll be uploaded first. I did the same little rant in that, and that's the fact that for the most part, if you go online and you say, hey, how are these monogram A26s? You get the, it's got bad shape. Oh, it's got this. Oh, it's got that. Yeah, soft detail. Blah, 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 blah. Raised panel lines. Yes, it has raised panel lines. This came from an era when engraved panel lines weren't a common thing. But for what you're paying for this, you're getting a lot of kit out of it. For those who are complaining about shape issue, I did this on the other one and I'll do it here. If you line up the nose gear openings, they're off by, I want to say, maybe 1 millimeter. The ICM, this is the new ICM kit, by the way, for reference. This is the brand new, $100 ICM kit. And I said, you put them side by side with the monogram. This is the monogram, the B model, the Revell monogram, gun-nosed B version. You put those side by side. The back of the nose gear and the front of the Bombay is exactly the same. The Bombay does go a little farther back. To be honest, that might be a K model modification. I'll have to look into that. Nose gear door within 1 mil. That's 4.8 centimeters. That's 2 inches and a bit of actual scale difference. You're talking about being off by yay much. It's not a lot for something that was, for the most part, hand tooled 30 years ago versus 3D modeled and CAD done and CNC machined and everything else. Interior detail, you're about the same. You're not seeing significantly less or more across of them. You got the same open wing structure as you have on this one, which you really wouldn't see looking up in the Bombay anyways. This is maybe a day's worth of work. All I've done, I've glued in the Bombay doors because this is going to be closed. I've glued in the bomb racks. Everything else is molded on. That's just interior green paint, some detail painting, a black wash, and a dry brush. That's all I've done. You could do this in a day and get this same look. It's got to be flat coated. There's a bit of a shine to it. That's the black wash. It's a bit of a glossy wash. Once I flat coat it, that'll dull down. You won't even notice it. But that detail you're getting after maybe a day's worth of work. I'm amazed. Cockpit, same. I mean, there's a lot of detail I haven't painted because it's going to be behind a gun nose. Nose wheel well, yeah, you could have been a bit better. There's a bit of a hollow bit down the middle. You could definitely tell that Monogram built the kit to detail what you could see and not detail where you won't see it. But anyways, you're getting an amazing kit. Cockpit, the seat, everything is really well detailed. All of these little parts, again, all of these are individual molded. There's no extra bits I've glued on. All of this detail is all molded on. Same here, all these radios, all the little bottles, everything is molded on, and all I've done is just detail paint, black wash, and dry brush, and it's popped. It's amazing. The instrument panel, that's something that you'd expect from Tamiya in terms of like an early Tamiya instrument panel with no clear plastic, no decals. That's just paint and black wash, and I mean that's passable. Again, I mentioned it in the other one. This is the only soft spot I would say. This turret sight is, there's a lot of, this is only like 3 different pieces: the back, the center sight, and the seat. It could probably use with a bit more detail. I'd be interested to see. This is the Vietnam K model ICM, so I don't have. Actually, maybe I do have the gunner's position. I should look into that. This is the only thing I would look at and say, hey, you guys should have put some more effort into it. There's a lot of soft detail on here, but you're not going to see much. It's buried down inside this pit, and all you have is a flat window in the top with a couple of clear pieces. You're not going to see 80% of this detail is going to be lost. So again, I'm not worried about too much of it. Wheel wells look great. Now, that being said, this is a later version that has the forward and the rear bulkheads. The original one, which is this one, did not have the front or back bulkheads. That would be an issue for anybody trying to build this kit. This is the later Revell release of it, and it did have the two bulkheads. This versus this, you know, if you're looking down inside, you're not seeing much. If anything, I actually like this, the monogram one, a bit better because it's got the hollow pieces, whereas ICM, those little strengthening plates are solid. But I mean, again, the doors are exactly the same size. The nacelles are almost exactly the same size. The ICM ones are actually quite a bit deeper. I'd be interested to see plans to see actually which one is more accurate. At the front, they are almost identical in terms of diameter. Length, it's hard to say. If I line up the gear openings, yeah. The monogram one's a little longer, a little pointier. Again, I don't know if that's a K model specific thing or not, but that's a bit of a difference. But I mean, again, for being a 30-year-old hand-tooled kit, these monogram kits just cannot be beat. And this rant was basically about, don't necessarily believe every review online. Get your hands on it, see what you think. At the end of the day, I disagree. Don't believe in a bunch of red lines drawn on the internet talking about how, oh, the shape is wrong here and the shape is wrong there. Yeah, you know what? It might be wrong. This might be wrong. But that again, ICM might be wrong. So who knows? Build what you want. Enjoy the build. Don't necessarily worry about what other people online have said about a certain kit that you want to build. Now, rant is over. It's painted. It's weathered. It's dry brushed. I got to go through and do a flat coat on all these interior pieces. And then I'm going to start gluing the fuselage together. I also need to do the bombs. I'm going to put bombs in both of them. You're not going to see anything on this B model, but the other one you will. But I'm going to install the bombs anyways, just so that it looks complete in my mind, at least. I know the interior is fully detailed. So yeah, just a flat coat, and then start assembling the fuselages, get all the interior pieces in, get the bombs installed, get these fuselages glued together, and then we'll move on. So let's keep going, and we'll see the rest of this. Here you can see I start gluing the interior frames into the fuselage, starting with the forward cockpit, working my way back through the bomb bay section and into the radio operator section. And every time I glue a piece in, I assemble the fuselage just to ensure that everything is aligned properly. And it just saves you down the road from finding out you've glued a piece in with a slight, angle or it's crooked or something. So always use the fuselage and dry fit everything as much as possible to ensure you keep everything aligned as you assemble. So I figured it was time to take a quick look at just how I've done this mess. So trying to get the rear, especially on this one, it's still off by a bit, to be honest. Trying to get the rear of these nacelles in place caused some issues. I noticed it on the C model earlier. It wasn't quite as bad as this one. For some reason, these edges are just off a little bit. So in order to get a clamp with the gear, with that one, it wasn't too hard with the C model because the gear doors were closed, and I was able to get a clamp in there and hold it. But with this one, with the gear door open, and there's already a little bit of a wobble to these, I can't get a clamp in here. You may have seen it on the earlier video when I did this one. There's no way to get a clamp in here easily enough to get it done. So I had to resort to basically this. I slid a flat file underneath the gear doors, and I used another file up on top with these big clamps, and I was able to get enough squeeze force to hold the nacelle to the bottom of the wing without doing anything crazy to these gear doors. Yeah, it's one of those things. You gotta get it creative at times. Now the fun part is gonna be trying to get this out. Yeah, oh, there we go. That wasn't that bad. Yeah, a little bit of a mark on that, but I'm not too worried. Now I'll just have to go through and clean up the back of these seams. Bit of putty and sanding, make sure that looks all good. And then I do have to be very careful with this one, as I do plan to do this one in Alclad. So it can be, you gotta be very careful with the sanding. Just make sure your sanding isn't too crazy. You get all of your deep scratches taken care of before you get your black base coat down. But we're moving right along. Oh, of course, both of them fall out. Heaven forbid things ever went the way we're supposed to. But anyways, so there we go. You can see with the wings just kind of temporarily in place. It is going to need quite a bit of, yeah, because the main gear is right about there already. It's very tail heavy, and I've still got the whole tail piece to go on. So I'm going to have to wait until I get all the fuselage glued together, the wings glued on, the engine's finished up, get the landing gear kind of temporarily fit in place, and then play with some weight, figure out how much weight I got to jam into the nose in order to keep this from tail sitting. Same with the K model, as it is going to be on its wheels. I'll have to get all that balanced. But yeah, it's coming along slow and steady. But yeah, so I guess next will be the puttying and the sanding on this rear section. Get these ready for a coat of primer. I'm going to have to mask off these gear doors somehow, find a way to tape off all these details so I don't get paint on them, and then just jam Kleenex into that hole to keep it from getting any paint in there, and then we can move right on to the priming stage. So we're getting there. And here you'll see I start gluing the fuselage together. And the best way to do this, if you haven't seen it before, is just start at one end and work back. So I usually start at the nose, and I just glue a little bit at a time, and that ensures that I have a lot of time to get the seams as straight as possible. A lot of times with larger pieces like a fuselage, you get twisting or warping in the plastic. So if you start at one end, get the seam, work your way back a couple inches at a time, give it lots of time in between, and you'll get a nice straight fuselage, and it ensures that your seam is as lined up as possible and minimizes the sanding and puttying. Now this is a monogram kit, so you'll see I still have to do a lot of puttying and sanding at the end, but it's a lot easier than if you tried to glue the entire fuselage in one shot. Now you'll also see here I glue the bomb bay doors on, and it was never really designed to be assembled with the bomb bay doors closed, so the fit is really bad and there's not a lot of positive joint positioning in there. I probably could have done better if I built a couple of supports or some sort of alignment tabs, and I didn't. So I ended up just using quite a bit of super glue and putty at the end to get everything lined up, and it's still not perfect, but you know, it's manageable. But I really should have spent some more time making sure this was done right. So here I finally took the plunge, got the clear pieces glued on in preparation for the masking and priming of the fuselage. Fit, again, not the best. And with a bit of work, they look okay, but you know, you got to put a bit of effort into these older monogram kits. Even though this is a later boxing, it's, you know, a later mold, I should say, in 1993 molding. You still got to put some effort into these things to get them to look good. And here I start assembling the landing gear. No particular reason why I do it at this point, just I wanted to paint the engines and start prepping for that, and they are the same color, steel. So I just went through and got all the landing gears and whatnot prepped while I'm getting ready to paint the engine cores. And here I'm trying to get the nose weights figured out. I tried to use the landing gear in place, but they don't really snap into place. They have to be glued in order to stay in their locations. So I just ended up using wingtip, use your fingers on the wingtip to balance the aircraft, and just made sure that as it sits right now, it does want to sit on the nose. You'll notice I have pretty much the entire airframe assembled, and the only pieces that are not installed for the most part are forward of the main gear attach points. So as long as it sits nose heavy now, once all the cowlings and engines and props are added, it should have no issue staying on its wheels. here I start off the masking process, pretty much bog standard for how I do it, a bit of Tamiya tape over the windows, and then use a backlight to clearly see the outlines, and then I just use a sharp X-Acto knife to cut it. If you haven't seen my video on that before, I'll put a link up above to my video on how I do my masking. But yeah, you can always check that out if you're not too sure. Okay, so just as we're plugging along on here, before I go any further, just quick update here. So I've got, this is engines have been painted with the Vallejo metallizer steel. Turned out really well. I still have to paint the reduction gear housing and everything up here in the front and the mags, and then do some detail painting and some weathering. But at least I got the steel done, and I also got the landing gear painted steel. So as well, I've still got some brake lines that will be painted black, and then the oleos will be painted chrome. So I just got to touch those up. And again, there'll be some black wash and weathering I'll be doing on these, and then they can be installed at a later date. So I got that all done. Right now, also, the wheel wells have been masked. Getting ready to do the kind of real first coat of primer on this. Also came to the realization that I never filled the nacelle wing joints on this B model. I did do it on the C model earlier, and if you've watched the time lapse of that, you would have seen it. So my process for this, just because of the angles and the detail and everything around it, is I'm using just straight Elmer's white glue. You would have probably seen here just a couple of seconds ago in the video. I did this. No, you know what? I haven't done it with this one yet. I did that with the C model. Anyways, I find the white glue method is really easy. You can put the white glue on, you can get it jammed down into the seam, and then I'm just using a Q-tip with a little bit of water here in this little tray, and I'm able to wipe the excess white glue off of the area around it, and it doesn't leave any kind of real wide glue seam that can eventually peel back, but you're filling that seam with white glue, and then you can paint over it, and you're not worried about sanding and ruining details. I wouldn't do this for like a fuselage seam or any type of seam that is very visible, but especially for seams that are down inside corners like this, and are in a very difficult place to sand and already have some curves or shape to it. This is an easy way to fill in the hole. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be filled in enough that you can easily paint it later. I find this works really well. So that's pretty much all you need to do. And then as I said, that will dry. It will shrink slightly as it dries. But it's not going to be a huge gap. It'll be a closed seam, and it's a lot easier to work like this with a little bit of this white glue and a Q-tip. Eventually, I need to start playing with Mr. Surfacer. I have seen quite a few videos online of people using Mr. Surfacer and a Q-tip with some Mr. Hobby paint thinner and a Q-tip just like this, and you can work the Mr. Surfacer off similar to white glue, but when it dries, it becomes sandable and paintable. So it gives you a little bit, I mean, this is still paintable, but the Mr. Surfacer becomes sandable, so you can use Q-tip to clean it up, especially when you have something like this with raised panel lines. And that's something that I've always had issues with, like this, where I've done a lot of sanding on the fuselage, on these monogram A-26s. You'll lose detail. But if you use Mr. Surfacer, you can do this similar with Mr. Surfacer with the thinner, and you end up with a nice seam that's then sandable later, and you can add and yada yada yada. Anyways, that's pretty much that. We are done filling those seams. I might have to do another layer down the way, but it's good enough for now. And here's the fuselage. I said I've got the green. I still have to, oh, you know what? I'll do it right now while I've got the glue out. I got to go through around these canopies and do the same thing. So it works well on the clear because it dries clear. It doesn't leave any weird colors that you see from the inside. But anywhere along, for example, here, where there's a bit of a gap with the canopy, it's easy to fill in. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to get rid of the gap completely. It's not going to fix everything, but it will hide the worst of it. And that's all I'm really trying to do. Hide the worst of it, make it look presentable. And we can go on. And then it's nice because you can use this with the glue. You can water it down, wipe it off. You've got the dry side. You can kind of sop up the water, and you can make sure that the vast majority of that white glue is cleared off, and you're only really getting the white glue where you want it, and it helps keep it from having these giant smudges of white glue everywhere that can eventually cause issues down the way. As you see, I'm using this Kleenex just to get the worst of the white glue off, and I'm using the water to make sure that I dilute any of that white glue that's on the surface, so it's easy to wipe up and doesn't become a problem. You'll see along the side here, there's a huge gap, and I can just be very, very liberal with the glue.
Mommy's not up there.
She's in the shower. Apologies for that. My kid needs a hand, which I will do for her in a second here when I am finished here. Anyways, be very liberal with the glue. Make sure it's all jammed in there. Being white glue, there's no kind of issues ruining plastic. It's easy to clean, which is kind of what I do with the water. So I jam it in everywhere. Make sure the gaps are filled, and then just gently wipe the surface. Like that. And we make sure. So there, we'll leave it like that, let it dry. We'll come back a little later, see what she looks like. I think for the most part, this is pretty much ready to go for paint. Primer, I should say. Yeah, I think I'm pretty much ready to go for primer for this. So I'll get a coat of primer on this soon, see how she looks, and then yeah, we're getting very close to wrapping up part 1 here of this this build video. And here you'll see I actually have some of that Mr. Surfacer I was talking about. So you paint it on with a paintbrush and then use a little bit of paint thinner on a Q-tip to clean it up. I will most likely do a tips and tricks video on this down the road. But until then, just in case you're curious, that is what I am doing. And here you'll see I start prepping the underwing gun pods. This particular kit I am doing 2 pods, so you'll see the black ones are from the C kit, and then I use the gray ones from the B kit. And there are historical pictures for this type of setup, and I figured that as a ground attack kind of gun nose, it would be more likely to have the extra gun pods and whatnot. So, and that looks cool, so that's what I went with. So here we are back for another update on this A26, and you can get a good look at the status of it here. Basically, it's ready for paint. I've got the whole thing primed. I've taken a quick look at all the seams. There's a few seams that still stick out, but it's gonna be very difficult to get a lot of these perfect. It's an early monogram kit, and it's got the raised panel line. So the more I sand and clean it up, the more panel lines I destroy. So there's this fine balance between keeping the panel line detail versus sanding off the seam lines. And at some point I just have to accept that good enough is good enough. This, I believe, is good enough. A lot of the nose seam is cleaned up. Everything looks decent. Not a lot to worry about. Again, it's not perfect, but it's gonna have to do. It's gonna be dirty. I'm gonna paint this alclad, so it's gonna get coated in a layer of gloss black, and then it's gonna get coated in the alclad, and then I'm gonna weather it. I'm gonna weather it pretty heavily. I'm gonna seal the gloss, the alclad, I should say, on a gloss, so it doesn't lose its shine. But after that, I'll get the decals out so you can see how it's gonna look. I've got to paint the insides of the, I believe it's black, or is it olive green? So it's got olive green on the nose and on the insides of the cowlings, which I have to mask off and do. It's going to have a black section on the rudder. And then it's going to have, I'm going to do a ton of exhaust staining on it, and I'm going to beat it up a little bit. It's going to look dirty. It's going to look like it's been used in combat the way it would have when it was used in combat. So it's not going to be a pristine aircraft in any sense of the term. So some of these issues with the finish and the fit are going to be hidden in the fact that it's going to be weathered. And the weathering will your eyes will not be drawn to some of the inaccuracies because it'll be drawn to the weathering. And that's my hope. And I think it's going to look really, really good when it's all done, especially when you have the decal on the nose, the olive drab, the black, the props, you know, some exhaust staining across the top, some staining here from the guns being fired. You know, you get oil stains and whatnot. It's going to look dirty. It's going to look messy. It's going to look good. So that's the plan. So right now, everything is done. I've got the spare parts. This is all that's left for the kit that I haven't installed yet. Cowlings, engines, props, and a few antennas and fiddly bits. So there's not much left to go. So the next step here, gloss black the entire thing. Get that coat of base black down in order for the alclad, and then do the alclad. Similar to the Spitfire, I'm going to hit it with overall airframe aluminum, and I'm going to start picking out some random bits. Like the turret might be a slightly different shade of aluminum. I might do some of these panels here on the wing a slightly different shade of aluminum. We'll see as we go. I got to figure out if the ailerons were fabric or not, because if they are, I'll have to hand paint those. I forgot to do that ahead of time. I'll have to hand paint those aluminum before. I might even have to do the research before I get too far, because I can always spray the aluminum, mask it off before I paint the gloss black. So I'll have to do that research as well. But either way, next step, it's either going to be the gloss black or the aluminum for the control surfaces. I just have to figure out those details. And then it's just alclad, do some different shades here and there, seal it, and then I can worry about everything else. The decals, the weathering, all the other bits and pieces that have to go onto it. And that way, like I said, the alclad will keep its shine. So here we go. Let's continue on this. So just quickly before I forget, keep your eyes out for part 2. It might be a few weeks, probably a few months before I get this finished, but then you'll be able to hop over part 2, take a look at this as I progress from the current state in this all the way through paint, decals, weathering, fiddly bits to a finished model. So that's it for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2.
Thank you for watching, guys, and as always, if you are interested in any of the content you see, you can access my website at www.seans-aviation.com. You can see all the latest pictures of aircraft and museums and the build logs of all of my current models and past models on that site. And if you're interested in any of this content, please click the subscribe button here on YouTube to follow more. Thank you very much, and see you guys next time.